91%. A chilling statistic, stark and unyielding as cold steel. This was the mortality rate of Japanese carrier crew members by August of 1945. Not casualties, mind you, but unequivocally, irrevocably dead. For every 100 souls who served aboard the steel leviathans of the Imperial Japanese Navy's carrier fleet, a mere 9 clung to life at war's end. The Imperial Navy, once boasting 10 formidable fleet carriers, paragons of naval power, concluded the conflict with a haunting emptiness, a void where floating fortresses once reigned supreme. Allow me to unravel the grim real-world narrative of how an entire naval culture, steeped in tradition and martial pride, unwittingly orchestrated its own demise, a macabre ballet of self-destruction dictated by the pitiless laws of mathematics, a suicide pact writ large upon the ocean's surface. Japan initiated the Pacific War brandishing what many considered the sharpest, most lethal weapon in naval aviation, a cadre of superbly trained carrier pilots. Each aviator possessed an astounding accumulation of over 800 hours of flight training, a testament to the rigorous standards and unwavering commitment of the pre-war Imperial Navy. These were the samurai of the skies. Yet, by 1944, a mere 3 years into the conflagration, the situation had deteriorated drastically. Newly minted pilots, desperately needed to replace mounting losses, were thrust into the cockpit with a paltry 50 hours, sometimes even less, of flight experience, a fraction of their predecessors' preparation. The reason for this catastrophic decline? A fatal strategic miscalculation, a critical flaw woven into the very fabric of Japanese naval doctrine. The Imperial Navy stubbornly refused to rotate seasoned, battle-hardened pilots back to training commands. These veterans, repositories of invaluable combat experience, were perpetually committed to frontline duty, flying sortie after sortie until fate, or more accurately, American anti-aircraft fire, claimed them. Every veteran stayed in combat, it seemed, until they inevitably succumbed to the Grim Reaper's embrace, a relentless attrition that bled the Japanese carrier air arm dry, one irreplaceable pilot at a time, and they all died, the best and brightest, consumed by the insatiable maw of war, victims of a system that valued unwavering dedication above all else, even survival. Here, then, is the brutal arithmetic, the cold, hard logic that sealed Japan's fate. At the pivotal Battle of Midway, a clash that irrevocably altered the course of the Pacific War, Japan suffered the loss of 4 of its prized fleet carriers, along with a staggering 322 aircraft, a blow from which it never fully recovered. But the sheer material loss, devastating as it was, paled in comparison to the true strategic catastrophe, the crippling loss of 110 veteran pilots. Each of these men represented not merely a trained aviator, but a vital piece of institutional knowledge, each possessing over 2 years of intensive training and combat experience, years that could not be compressed, shortcuts that proved fatal. While Japan, straining its industrial capacity to the breaking point, managed to produce approximately 200 new pilots per month, a figure that sounds impressive on paper, it was woefully inadequate to meet the escalating demands of the war. In stark contrast, the United States, fueled by its vast industrial engine and a more pragmatic approach to pilot training, churned out an astounding 2,500 new pilots per month. Do the math, the numbers whisper a chilling truth. Japan was strategically, mathematically dead, long before the final surrender ceremonies were conducted, doomed by a deficit of human capital it could not overcome. But here's where the story becomes even more grim, where the flaws in Japanese naval philosophy become glaringly, fatally apparent. The carriers themselves, the very platforms upon which Japan's naval ambitions rested, were, in many respects, death traps, floating pyres waiting for a spark. Japanese damage control doctrine, steeped in the nationalistic fervour of the era, prioritised offensive spirit above all else, foolishly believing that sheer willpower and unwavering courage could somehow compensate for material deficiencies and inadequate training. They literally didn't train damage control effectively, a bewildering oversight in the brutal calculus of naval warfare. American carriers, recognizing the crucial importance of damage control, established dedicated firefighting schools, rigorously training crews in the art of containing and extinguishing fires, repairing battle damage, and preserving the integrity of the ship. Japanese carriers, on the other hand, often relied on little more than buckets and rudimentary equipment, woefully inadequate against the inferno of burning aviation fuel. Consider the fate of the Taiho, flagship of the first mobile fleet. Struck by a single torpedo from the submarine USS Albacore, the initial damage was relatively minor. However, the crew, lacking proper training and understanding of ventilation systems, failed to shut them down. Aviation fuel vapours, escaping from ruptured fuel tanks, spread insidiously throughout the ship's interior, creating a volatile, explosive atmosphere. 6 agonizing hours later, a single spark, perhaps from a faulty electrical connection, ignited the accumulated vapours, transforming the mighty Taiho into a 27,000-ton floating bomb, a catastrophic detonation that ripped through the ship, gutting her from stem to stern. A survivor from the Shokaku, another of Japan's premier carriers, recounted the terrifying events of her final moments. The American dive bombers came from the sun, he recalled, their silhouettes stark against the blinding glare. 3 bombs, that's all it took. 3 bombs, and 20 minutes later, our carrier was gone. Gone, along with 1,360 men, incinerated or drowned in the fiery maelstrom. The water itself, slick with burning oil, became a death trap, an extension of the inferno engulfing the ship. Those who managed to escape the blazing wreckage often found themselves consumed by the flames that danced upon the waves, a horrifying testament to the inadequacy of Japanese damage control and the sheer lethality of carrier warfare. Now let's delve into the numbers that are often overlooked, the statistics that paint an even more disturbing picture of Japanese naval practices. Japanese carriers, in a desperate attempt to maximize their offensive capabilities, routinely packed aircraft into every available space, cramming them into the hangars, crowding them onto the flight deck, even stowing them in passageways and other unsuitable locations. The Akagi, for example, was designed to accommodate 60 aircraft, yet on the day of Midway, she carried a staggering 91, a dangerous overextension that transformed the carrier into a tinderbox. When a single bomb penetrated the hangar deck, it didn't merely destroy one plane, it ignited a chain reaction, detonating 20 or more aircraft in a cascading inferno. The resulting explosions ripped through the ship, turning the hangars into crematoriums, sealing the fate of hundreds of sailors trapped within. The real killer, the insidious flaw that amplified the devastation, was Japanese carrier doctrine regarding the arming and fueling of aircraft. Unlike the Americans, who typically performed these hazardous tasks on the open flight deck, the Japanese routinely armed and fueled aircraft within the enclosed confines of the hangars. One bomb penetrating the hangar meant every plane exploded in a confined space, creating an unimaginable conflagration, a furnace of fire and destruction that consumed everything in its path. At Midway, the Kaga, another of Japan's ill-fated carriers, absorbed 4 devastating bomb hits. The result? 711 men dead in a mere 9 minutes, a horrifying loss of life in a shockingly short span of time. Survivors described the hangar deck as having been transformed into a blast furnace, fueled by thousands of gallons of highly flammable aviation fuel, a scene of unimaginable horror and carnage. But perhaps the most insane statistic, the data point that encapsulates the sheer strategic incompetence of the Imperial Japanese Navy, is this. Japanese carriers had no radar-directed anti-aircraft guns until 1944, a critical deficiency in the face of increasingly sophisticated American air attacks. Their gunners were forced to aim manually, attempting to track and target aircraft streaking through the sky at speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour, a task bordering on the impossible. The hit probability for Japanese anti-aircraft fire was a dismal 2%. American carriers, equipped with radar-directed guns and vastly superior fire control systems, boasted an hit probability of 18%, a 9-fold increase in effectiveness. That's not combat, that's mathematical suicide, sending men to their deaths with weapons that were demonstrably inadequate. Here's what sealed their fate, the inescapable reality that condemned the Imperial Japanese Navy to oblivion. After losing 4 of its fleet carriers at Midway, Japan had 6 remaining. In the next 2 years, they somehow found the resources and manpower to build 7 more, a Herculean effort under increasingly difficult circumstances. America, on the other hand, built 90, an astonishing display of industrial might that dwarfed Japan's efforts. Not a typo, 90. Japan launched one new carrier in 1944. America launched 19. The Japanese were fighting industrial capacity with human spirit. Spirit lost. The collapse of pilot training was even more catastrophic. By 1944, American pilots received 300 hours of training, including 100 hours in operational aircraft, giving them a crucial edge in combat. Japanese pilots got 30 hours total, mostly in gliders to save fuel. They couldn't land on carriers in calm seas, much less combat. At the Philippine Sea, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, Japan lost 3 carriers and 400 aircraft. But here's the devastating part. They lost 450 pilots. Only 43 were rescued. America lost 29 aircraft. The kill ratio was 13-1. That's not a battle, it's an execution. A captured Japanese naval officer admitted, "We knew after Midway. We knew we couldn't replace the pilots. Every carrier operation after that was a suicide mission. We just didn't call them that yet." The Shinano tells the whole story. The largest carrier ever built, 72,000 tons, sunk on her maiden voyage by 4 torpedoes from one submarine. 1,435 dead. The crew didn't know how to use damage control equipment. They had watertight doors that they didn't close. The pride of the Japanese Navy sank because nobody taught the crew basic damage control. Let's talk about the final carriers. By 1945, Japan was using converted battleships and cruise ships as carriers. The pilots couldn't actually land on them. They were one-way launch platforms for kamikaze attacks. The crew's job was to sail to launching range and die. Survival wasn't part of the mission profile. The last operational Japanese carrier, the Amagi, was destroyed at anchor by American aircraft. The crew was still aboard, waiting for aircraft that would never come. Pilots who didn't exist for a war already lost. Here's the final darkest mathematics. Japan started with 3,500 trained carrier pilots. By war's end, 112 were alive. The carriers that revolutionized naval warfare became steel coffins for 25,000 sailors who believed offensive spirit could overcome mathematical reality. The Japanese carrier